Fortunes built on nothing. Empires shattered overnight. It wasn't the first time. The year is 1720. London, a city of burgeoning ambition and fervent speculation, pulses with a new kind of fever. Not plague, but profit. A speculative frenzy that would reshape the very fabric of English society and leave a cautionary tale echoing through centuries. At its heart lay the South Sea Company, a seemingly grand enterprise chartered to trade with Spanish colonies in South America. A visionary concept, or so it seemed, promising untold riches from exotic goods and vast new markets. But there was a deeper, more immediate motive. England, much like many nations emerging from conflict, carried a substantial national debt. Wars are expensive, and funding them often meant borrowing heavily from private citizens and institutions. The South Sea Company offered a radical solution. They proposed to take on this national debt. In exchange, the government would grant them an exclusive monopoly on trade with the South Seas and pay them a fixed annuity. It was, in essence, a massive debt-for-equity swap. Creditors of the government could exchange their illiquid government annuities for shares in the South Sea Company. The company, in turn, would manage and eventually pay down the debt. On paper, it looked like a stroke of genius. The government would be relieved of its crushing debt burden, and the company, with its promised trade riches, would thrive. The public, eager for investment opportunities, began to take notice. But the reality of South Sea trade was far more challenging than advertised. Spain, still smarting from recent wars, largely controlled access to its colonies. The actual volume of trade conducted by the South Sea Company was, in fact, minimal. This crucial detail, however, was conveniently overlooked. The company's directors, along with various influential figures in government, began to aggressively promote the stock, painting a picture of unimaginable future profits. They engaged in what we now recognize as classic market manipulation, spreading rumors of lucrative ventures, bribing journalists, and even offering secret allocations of stock to members of Parliament and the royal court. The stock, which began the year 1720 around £128 per share, started its meteoric ascent. By March, it was over 300. By May, it topped 500. The momentum was intoxicating, drawing in everyone from dukes to domestic servants. The allure of quick riches proved irresistible. People mortgaged their homes, sold their inheritances, and invested every last shilling, convinced they were riding the wave of the future. The streets of London buzzed with talk of little else. This boom wasn't confined to the South Sea Company alone. The speculative fervor it ignited spilled over into countless other ventures. What became known as bubble companies sprang up, offering shares in schemes ranging from the plausible to the utterly absurd. There was the company for carrying on an undertaking of great advantage, but nobody to know what it is. Another promised to make salt water fresh. Others sought investment for the more effectual performing of funerals. These bubble companies, many without any real business model or prospect of profit, capitalized on the public's insatiable hunger for speculation. It was a clear sign that the market had detached itself from any underlying economic reality. The South Sea Company, ironically, became concerned about these competitors. Their own stock was at its peak, reaching £1,000 per share by July. They feared these smaller bubbles would divert capital and attention. Using their influence in Parliament, the company pushed for the Bubble Act of June 1720. This legislation made it illegal to form joint stock companies without a royal charter, effectively outlawing many of their smaller rivals. The act was intended to solidify the South Sea Company's dominance. But in a cruel twist of irony, it inadvertently popped the entire speculative balloon. With the smaller bubbles gone, the South Sea Company was left standing exposed, its true lack of value painfully clear. The confidence began to waver. Smart money, including some of the company's own directors who had sold their shares at the top, started to quietly exit. The stock, which had surged to 1,000, began its precipitous fall. By September, the price crashed to under £200. Panic gripped London. The very same streets that had celebrated unprecedented wealth were now filled with despair. Investors, rich and poor alike, saw their fortunes vanish. The collapse triggered a national crisis. Banks failed, businesses went bankrupt, and thousands were ruined. The Bank of England even stepped in, attempting to stabilize the market, but the damage was already done. A parliamentary inquiry was launched, revealing widespread fraud, bribery, and corruption among the company's directors and their political allies. Several prominent figures were imprisoned, and their estates confiscated. Even the king's mistress was implicated. The scandal reached the highest echelons of power, highlighting the insidious way greed can permeate every level of society, from the street vendor to the sovereign's inner circle. The South Sea bubble of 1720 serves as a stark reminder. It illustrates the timeless dangers of speculative mania, the seductive power of quick wealth, and the devastating consequences when financial markets lose all tether to reality. It was England's first great financial mania, a template for countless others that would follow, from tulipmania to the dot-com boom. Because while the specifics change, human nature and our susceptibility to greed rarely does. To understand how another seemingly infallible scheme crumbled into dust, watch our next deep dive.